we've got something a little different today. I came across this movie just by chance and I realized, you know what, I need to talk about this. So we're going to get back to the main series, which is, I believe, still cameras or sound, one of those two. And we'll do that in the next episode. But today we are going to review a movie. And we're going to review a feature-length movie. Now, in the past, we've only done short films, but we're going to shift gears today. You know, when we think about good movies, the last thing that comes to mind are these made-for-TV movies. And if you watch the Hallmark Channel, if you watch the Lifetime Channel, you'll see these. Almost all of these movies are about relationships. And they have a whole slew of them at Christmas time. I actually worked on one of those last year. I believe Nia Vardalos was one of the actors on that movie, and the star of the show was this really cute little dog in a Christmas outfit and running around all over the beach. These movies, well, they don't have a whole lot of money, so the stories are not going to be real ambitious. They can't be. But back in the day, the major networks used to do these kind of movies too. And that's what we're going to talk about, because there were a few that did stand out. Let's talk about Sybil, starring Sally Field. And this movie was about a person with multiple personalities. Another movie, Brian's Song, with Billy D. Williams and James Caan as the main characters. You know what, both of those guys are probably a little too old to be playing the roles that they did, but this was a hugely anticipated made-for-TV movie. The movie we're going to talk about today, however, has been judged by actually many people to be the best made-for-TV movie ever. And it was called Duel, action thriller starring Dennis Weaver, portraying a character by the name of David Mann. And this is the movie that really launched Steven Spielberg into the industry. And it's very appropriate that we have automotive supplies in the background here today, because that's kind of what this movie was about. You know, some of you might remember this movie. It aired back in November 1971. It was the ABC Movie of the Week. You remember that tune? Hey, let's sing it, you know. Da 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 da. The ABC Movie of the Week. You know, I can't show this channel, I can't show this movie on this channel, but what I can do is to provide you some links. You can see them down below. I actually have two links. One is to, I think, an American-made recast of the show, but they got blocked. They could not show the entire movie by probably ABC. And there's another link that's an Italian version. They are kind of, you know, beyond the reach of American corporations. So they show the entire film, especially the ending, except everything is in Italian. Go ahead and click on those links, watch this movie. In addition, I've also provided 3 links to some interviews with Steven Spielberg. This is way after the movie, years later. He comes back and he talks about the making of Duel. And I think that's really fascinating. So why don't you go ahead and stop this video, click on the links, and watch the movie. There are a few things that put this movie out of our reach. By the way, if any of you are wondering what this thing here is, it's my microphone. The first hindrance to people like us, beginning filmmakers, who are making a movie like this, is obviously money. Now, this was not a big budget film, but it wasn't a small budget film either, and they did a lot of stunts. Okay, employed the world's best stunt driver at the time to drive that truck. You and I don't know anybody that can drive like that. Trust me, okay? And speaking of stunts, you know, they actually took that truck and they sent it over a real cliff. They destroyed that truck. That was not a miniature toy truck on a model. No, 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 no. That was the real thing. And Spielberg had set up 7 different cameras down at the bottom of the cliff to capture the action of that truck going over. It was a one-shot scene. There were no retakes. And think of the cost that they must have incurred to clean that mess up. Okay, you know, interestingly enough, the network executives almost forced a retake. When they saw the movie, they said, we want that last scene redone, and we want a fireball explosion with the truck. And yeah, I mean, I can kind of see where that would have added something to it, but Spielberg said no, he didn't want to do it. And I think one of the reasons he didn't want to do it was because he knew he was running out of time to get this thing done. You know, nevertheless, I assumed that he had to make the trip to the big office, you know, and all those ABC executives at that time were waiting for him to hear his side of the argument. Hey, was that the right clip or the right slide? It was. No, it wasn't. We don't know. Oh, well, maybe not. Okay. You know, another thing was that it was a dangerous movie to make. Was the name of the truck driver, world-class stunt driver. He almost did not make it out of that truck before it went over the cliff. If you watch the film and the ending, you're going to see that the driver's door is wide open. And that was a mistake, but Lofton had to jump off that truck before it went over, so he had no choice. Because the door was open, there were some people that thought, oh, you know what? That bad guy, the truck driver, he got away, he jumped out. And Spielberg did have to do a little bit of patching to emphasize the fact that no, the truck driver is dead. The thing that would hold us back from making the movie is that to do a movie like this, I mean, let's face it, you need to have a big name for this movie. And Dennis Weaver, at that time, he was a big star. And his face and his name really gave that movie a huge lift. Now, having said all of this, I also think that there are some special and several takeaways that we, as beginning filmmakers, can really learn from. First of all, the movie plot was simple, and this is what I think is the key takeaway to this film. We have an intro to the main character, his family, his job, and why he's on the road. He meets up with his truck, and he wants to get past the truck because, okay, well, maybe he's just in a rush. It really didn't matter. And that's it. There's your plot right there, because the trucker at that point decides that he's going to kill David Mann. Really not much else going on in that movie. There was no subplot in this feature film, which I thought was kind of unusual. I think feature films always should have a subplot. This one didn't. And when you watch it, his family, his job, didn't matter. It did not matter in the end. No subplot, and yet the movie still worked. Okay, now one of the key elements to the writing of the story was the lack of background between the trucker and David Mann. Did Mann kick sand in the trucker's face when they were both 10 years old? No, no. They did not know each other. The trucker is insane, period. And when you have that situation, you don't need any background, okay? The conflict itself was also very simple. Good versus evil. There were no gray areas. You had the good guy and the bad trucker, who we never saw. Did you notice that? Now think about that. This trucker was a cruel and sadistic SOB, but we never saw his face, ever. All we had was his arm out the window. That's all we could see. And that heightened the suspense to the viewers. We didn't know who we were dealing with, but it was that lack of a visible face that kept us tuned into this movie because we wanted to see it. We wanted to know who this guy was. And in the end, well, I guess we just had to be content with the fact that this guy is now dead. Whoever he was, but that was an interesting trick. You know, it's been used before, don't get me wrong, but you have a bad person and yet you don't really see him, you don't know who the bad guy is. By the way, was this a satisfying ending? Oh, you bet it was. Another thing, minimal dialogue. The dialogue really petered out as this movie went along. Towards the end, when man is in his car and he's yelling out, "How can he go so fast?" I think that was the last words that we heard in that movie. And you know what? There wasn't a whole lot of dialogue prior to that scene. So, now one thing I did like, in addition to minimal dialogue, was the use of narration. If you notice, they didn't just use narration at the beginning of the story or at the end of the story. They used it in other places too. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it worked very well. Now, another thing that they did was the use of innovative framing. In the roadside cafe, when David Mann looks out the window and he can see the truck sitting out there, he has to assume that somebody in that cafe is the evil truck driver, but he doesn't know who. So the camera is kind of perusing all the people in the cafe through the fingers of a hand, like this, because that's what David Mann is doing. He's got his hands over his face like this, and he's kind of looking at everyone. And as he does, everyone in the cafe is turning around and looking right back at him. So it kind of makes everybody a potential suspect of being the truck driver. The finger, camera through the fingers, I think really added to the paranoia that man was going through at that moment. Okay, rough and jerky footage can actually be used. Did you watch the film? Did you see the chase scenes where the frame is just going like this, you know? And most of the times we would say, hey, that's unusable. You can't use footage that looks that bad. But you know what? It worked. You know, it really showed the urgency of the moment. No drones, no stabilizers needed. You know, Spielberg is lying down on the back seat with the camera, and you can see he is just getting bounced around like that. And I thought it worked very well. So don't necessarily throw away the footage that you have that's really rough. Maybe there is a use for it. And finally, the second most important thing, the second most important takeaway for this film, what was number one? Simple plot. The shooting and the post-production was wrapped in about 6 weeks. That's just incredible. I really can't even believe that. I had read that the shooting had been done and completed in 12 days. I remember that I worked on a feature film once, and I had heard that they only did 18 days of shooting, which I thought was amazing. 12 days. And then immediately after that, they went into post-production, and they finished that up in 3.5 weeks. Now, Spielberg admitted he used 5 editors, and he probably worked them day and night to get this thing ready. But the point is, it can be done. It can be done. From the time to 6 weeks later, when it was already airing on TV, that is incredible. So the takeaway here is that you can do a film quickly. Yes, you can. It does not need to drag out. This whole process does not need to drag out.